So just before my last video premiered, I was informed about the latest Twitter war. Now you might be thinking, Twitter at war? No surprise there. Well, you would think so. And then you look at the context of said Twitter war. You then realize that it's more worthwhile to beg a deity for the end of days to come just out of cringe. Because today, Trash Pandas, we are looking at Twitter's latest war on gender. So before we get into the topic, let me give some much needed context for those who don't know a damn thing about it. As you can see here, my gameplay is different. It is Guilty Gear Strive, a Japanese fighting game with an anime art style. And this character I am playing as is Bridget. She will be the topic of today's video. Bridget is a character that has been around in the Guilty Gear franchise since 2002's Guilty Gear X2, a zoning character using a yo-yo as a weapon, with the additional caveat that she was at the time a trap. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Bridget here is not only packing a yo-yo, but also a sword. Now the key word here from my earlier statement is that she was a trap. She was a femboy. You see, in the latest installment of the Guilty Gear franchise, Guilty Gear Strive, Bridget came out as trans, and like the opening of The Rapture, Twitter had a lot of things to say about it. Over the past few days, everyone and their mother has been at each other's throats regarding the gender identity of a fictional character, because McDonald's no longer hires out of the job 20-year-olds who live in their mother's basement. Yes, Trash Pandas, today we will be looking into the latest episode of Twitter's war on gender, why it happened, and what the truth of the matter really is. Because apparently the gender identity of a fighting game character is so controversial it needs to be talked about. Let's begin. Let's go over the early lore of the character of Bridget before we dive into the Twitter war on gender. This will be necessary to understand the situation from both perspectives. Let's take it from the top. As described by the Guilty Gear Wiki, hailing from England, Bridget was born to a wealthy aristocrat soon after her twin brother. In a town convinced that male twins brought misfortune, the townspeople were so embedded in this superstition that they insisted the younger of any set of twin males be put to death or given up for adoption. Bridget's parents were unwilling to lose one of their children, and so they choose to raise Bridget as a daughter instead of a son, hiding her sex from the public eye. She would be raised by her rich parents, and after contemplating leaving behind her life and everyone she knows, she eventually becomes a bounty hunter of all things, earning money for her village and proving herself to her family as well. Said bounty hunter gig would lead her into the events of Guilty Gear X2, which doesn't really matter too much to this video, but ultimately she at the time still proclaims herself as a male. Her most major character development comes from the latest game in the series, wherein after she had already become a famous bounty hunter, she goes on a journey of self-discovery. Well, as conveyed as well as it could be in the arcade mode of Guilty Gear Strive. I will now play out the entire storyline that Bridget has in Guilty Gear Strive.
No wonder you're so famous. Looks are deceiving. I'll be back for more later, little lady.
I'm a boy. These girl clothes are, it's a long story.
I see.
Stop right there. That's enough.
I don't know what to do. I'm not strong like you, Mr. Kai. I'm too scared of losing what I have.
Running away, huh? Ain't you a little young for a midlife crisis?
Of course I'm running. I'm happy the way I am.
Discretion can be the better part of valor. But think about it. For the sake of your future self.
For my future self. But what if I make the wrong decision?
You got your whole life ahead of you, kid. Gotta learn to take a hit sometime.
And there are helping hands right in front of you.
I don't want to run scared anymore. If I keep on faking it like this, I know I'll regret it. So from now on, no matter what, no more lying to myself. Thank you. Both of you.
Don't mention it. Happy trails, cowgirl, or, cowboy.
Cowgirl is fine, because I'm a girl.
Oh, you were expecting more? What more is there? That's the entire thing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is the entire story arc. Bridget's entire storyline is just one big coming out story, and that's it. There are a few other endings, but these endings all basically share the same premise without being as blunt as the whole "I'm a girl" line. I'll link this video in the description for those who wish to see all the endings of Bridget's storyline. Now, I honestly hesitate to call it a story arc on its own, but more or less Bridget's entire entry into Guilty Gear Strive is really just her platform to proclaim to the world that she is coming out. Some other endings are lesser than or are just more nuanced, but overall, it's just her coming out story. This is a very bizarre thing to put as a character arc in a fighting game of all things, but nonetheless, it exists. However, it was still enough to garner controversy. So now that we know the context of the series, let's start diving into the Twitter war on gender. To no one's surprise, a lot of buzz has been going around on Twitter about Bridget and her newly discovered gender identity, because Twitter has all but become Tumblr 2, the squeakquel. Now, whilst a lot of people are in support of the storyline, the consensus is not overwhelming in one way. Both parties have a lot of traction. You have those who are all for the ending, and those who are displeased with the said ending. Let's take a look at some of these contrarians while we are here. You'll notice between the contrarians that there are two major subgroups of people who are against the ending. Let's go over the first one.
I warned of the extremist trans movement. We're not gonna stop with traps. I warned that they were likely gonna target femboys next and proclaim all femboys to be a transphobic slur too, the same way they did with traps. Look at what is happening now.
I mean, Bridget is technically a trap, so they just continue the same insane bullshit, though they went further with Bridget by vandalizing wikis to pretend he is a girl now, and using their own people being admins to block others from editing their lies out.
Vandalizing wikis to pretend he is a girl now? You mean correcting the wikis to be up to date with the franchise they reside in? I also wouldn't say admins would be blocking others from editing their lies if the lies are true. Let's continue into the contrarian's arguments.
But what does Scott think about Bridget?
She's valid.
Where is this character from?
He's from Guilty Gear. Correction, she.
Now I found out, essentially in a bad ending, Bridget is forced to call themselves a girl because they couldn't prove themselves of being a man, which was their whole backstory. To prove to their village that they were a man, to solve some shenanigans in it, after their parents intentionally assigned Bridget as a girl to avoid their death, because the village thought twins brought misfortune. By making Bridget trans, that means that their whole story was for absolutely nothing. Wasn't Bridget trying to prove the village that they were a man in the first place? Bridget was forced to believe they were a girl after trying to prove the opposite in one ending. Don't come at me with the whole acceptance BS. Their whole goal was to prove that they were a guy. To give up, they're basically living in a world of lies.
Here is one of many cases of misinformation within the debate against the coming out of Bridget. To once again go back to the Guilty Gear wiki, it states, as the child of multi-billionaire parents, Bridget was given the best training and tutoring as a child, exactly the upbringing expected for the daughter of a high society couple. Bridget loved her parents and so did her utmost to keep them from worrying for her, but she could see that continuing the charade, necessary as it was, filled them with guilt. Yet the harder she tried, the less effective her efforts became. They didn't believe her. She began to think of leaving the village, and that behaving as a man and bringing home a vast collection of riches would convince her hometown that their superstitions were unfounded. In 2181, almost as if on cue, Bridget found a bounty poster for a gear that promised a $500,000 bounty for her death. She wasted no time in setting out, leaving her parents' manor and made her way to the Forest of Demons. To her surprise, Dizzy had already been defeated. Somewhat discouraged, but not ready to give up, Bridget began to look for other bounties in hopes that she might still find a way to resolve her problems. Nowhere in this does it say anything about proving herself as a man. It's proving herself to her parents, trying to make them proud, nothing more and nothing less. I don't know where the prove herself as a man came from, just the proving herself to her village and providing for her family. That's just about it, really. There isn't much else to say on it. Let's continue.
I hope Bridget remains a man.
Bridget is, and always will remain, a femboy.
Y'all are weird as F and gross. So if a trans girl, like myself IRL, first started off as a femboy, like I did in many other trans girls, I am forever a femboy and not allowed to grow and realize I'm trans? Y'all need hobbies. Stop fetishizing. Let trans people exist.
The writer said he's a boy, so that's what he is.
LMFAO! No, they didn't. All of her information says female and uses female pronouns, and she said she's a girl. What more do you need?
Well, finding any female word used when talking about him. In Japan where, it's canon.
Maybe that in the Japanese dialogue, Bridget uses female pronouns, and she also still says she is a girl in the Japanese version. Also, I'm 100% sure his info in the game is using feminine pronouns in the Japanese version. You seriously need a hobby, dude.
Bruh, he's a guy. Sorry if you misunderstood the dialogue. Go ask any Japanese person.
Not you speaking for Japanese people who are legit posting trans art of her all over and calling her a she. Are you forgetting the literal creators of the game are Japanese and have made this character a trans girl? Denial isn't cute. Yuck.
I didn't think it was possible, but this is some really massive coping from these guys. Like, it's just one character. There will be other femboys for you to jack off to, like, goddamn. Another big argument I've seen from the opposition is that it's canon in Japan that she's a boy, even though the dialogue subtitles don't even change between either version of the game, but okay. We also have a contradiction in this argument. If the Japanese version has different dialogue, then let's take a look at this Q&A with Daisuke Ishiwatari. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. The literal creator of Guilty Gear. In this Q&A, Ishiwatari was asked about Bridget and said the following. Bridget is still a bounty hunter. However, the purpose is different from the beginning. It is simply to earn living expenses. He made a name for himself as a bounty hunter and contributed greatly to his parents and the village he grew up in. Bridget is now trying to figure out who she really is. Oh yeah, the game has a different dialogue between the Japanese and English dub, but you know, the creator of the game's input? Nah fam, that doesn't mean shit fam, I'm sorry. The foundations of this argument crumble when you take this into consideration. Let's continue off of one of these threads we previously covered. Isn't it canon that Bridget is trans now? Not some vandalization by left-wingers?
Not quite. It's very complicated. There was a write-up recently that laid out a brief history of Japan's Otaku-Noko culture, Bridget's relation to that culture, and how both it and Bridget are fundamentally incompatible with Western trans culture. The TLDR was that in the early days of Japan's Otokonoko culture, their femboys faced societal pressure to become trans because of a cultural expectation that in order to like men you have to be a woman, and so many of these early Otokono became trans. Bridget as a trap femboy was instrumental in breaking that gender norm and allow Otokonoko to stay as men while being feminine and also being in the guise. Japan's Otokonoko culture, however, still contains some remnants of their early trans days, coy and vague jokes about their gender and being a woman being one such holdover. The way Bridget's bio and lines were written in Japanese and Korean both still contain the same vague language that leaves Bridget's gender largely unknown, something that is not all that uncommon in Japan's Otokonoko media. Only the English bio uses female pronouns, and the Western trans culture heavily favors being trans over femboy. Japan is the opposite. Japan's femboys used to be trans, and as a culture they evolved to become femboys later.
Okay, bro. Yeah, if that wasn't brain melting enough, I don't know what is. Firstly, let's go over what Otokonoko is. Otokonoko, male daughter or male girl, also pronounced as Otoko no Musume, is a Japanese term for men who have a culturally feminine gender expression. This includes, amongst other things, males with feminine appearances or those cross-dressing. Otokonoko is a play on the word, can't read that, that's kanji, boy, from the characters for male and child, which is also pronounced Otokonoko. In the slang term, the kanji for child is substituted with daughter. The term originated in Japanese manga and internet culture in the 2000s, but the concept reflects a broad range of earlier traditions and examples of male cross-dressing in Japan, such as onagata in kabuki theater. Its popularity increased around 2009 with the rise of dedicated maid cafes, fashion stores, cosmetic products, and a range of popular media in the otaku culture. It is often combined with the cosplay of feminine fictional characters by men. By extension, Otokonoko is also a genre of media and fiction about feminine-looking or feminine-dressing men and often contains erotic or romantic elements. It is mainly aimed at male audiences, but also appears in a lot of shoujo manga. Otokonoko characters have also begun to appear in mainstream Japanese popular entertainment such as manga, anime, and video games. Essentially, the culture, in air quotes, is just pertaining to effeminate men. Nothing too major here. I haven't been able to find a source that goes over any forcing effeminate men to be women. I actually found an article that calls a trans woman in Japan an Otokonoko. As far as this claim of the Japanese forcing effeminate men to be trans, I couldn't really find anything to back it up. That's not saying it never happened, just take that claim with a grain of salt. What you shouldn't take with a grain of salt is the fact that this Otokonoko culture seems to be a very popular thing on the internet and otaku culture and seemingly nothing else. Just more or less a progressive statement against gender norms. This is a good thing, but let's dive into more specifics on this eraser of Otokonoko men. Earlier in the thread, can you provide an example of how Bridget being a trans girl was done because femboy and trap are slur terms? I'm confused by this argument.
It's an ongoing thing. A big recent example of a Japanese femboy being changed to a trans girl during the localization process by the Westerns was I Think I Turned My Childhood Friend Into a Girl manga. This is a very brief overview of that debacle.
The linked video is from everyone's favorite lolicon, Rev Says Desu. In it, Rev goes over the localization of the manga I Think I Turned My Childhood Friend Into a Girl. Or at least that's its American name, as the original name translates into something completely different.
To quickly summarize the plot, it's about one male character who loves cosmetics, and what happens after his childhood friend, who is also male, tries putting makeup on him for the first time. To make it even more clear, it's a male character sharing feelings with another male character who cross-dresses, but as the author points out multiple times, still identifies as male. However, as noted by a fan translator in a recent review of the manga's English release, it appears that the translators at Seven Seas have rewritten the lead love interest in a way that intentionally misrepresents him as a transgender woman. Here are some of the many examples provided by this user. The first one where the localizers took dialogue where the character said he looks female, the point of cross-dressing, and translated to the character coming out as a girl, implying that the character came out as transgender instead of identifying as male as intended by the original authors. Here's another example where instead of being introduced by his teacher as a boy in the literal translation, localizers have introduced him as a female, something the character does not protest to in this version. And in the final example we're going to look at for now, localizers intentionally remove male pronouns from a frame where the character reiterates that he's a boy too.
This same guy linked another video from Dimitri Monroe, which goes over the same thing and other situations like it.
Beyond that, this video briefly goes over how first traps and now femboys are being systemically erased by hostile trans culture coming from the West. Bridget's mischaracterization in GG is just the latest example of an ongoing struggle.
Now I won't lie, forcing femboy characters as trans, especially if it's going against the creator's original intent, is fucked on so many levels. It's constraining effeminate men to specific gender roles, which is a very concerning thing. You wouldn't force a trans person to be cis, so why is it suddenly okay for cis people to be forced into being trans? Like, imagine if this was pushed onto an IRL person, you know? That being said, this point doesn't apply to Guilty Gear, because as shown before, the creator himself intended Bridget to become trans. We literally went over this. To show you the kind of copium these people are huffing because of Bridget, let's dive into my contribution after finding the counter evidence. So I found this out over the past 2 days of looking into this situation. I think you might need to read it. So I looked up if Guilty Gear's creators said Bridget's gender was canon, and I found a Q&A from Japan that translates to the following. This confirms Bridget's gender was planned by them from the start of Strive, breaking the entire argument of Bridget's a girl now entirely.
Pretty much the one-to-one with how I interpreted Bridget's story. Originally started bounty hunting and pain strength to fight against the superstition and tradition of his village. Now that he's largely achieved that goal with regards to his village, he suddenly finds himself without a goal because he's not struggling against an external force anymore. Now he has to figure out what to do with his newfound freedom and where he wants to go with himself, with no village trying to suppress him. Cue Bridget's Strive story, where he takes his first steps into finding out where he wants to go into the future. By the end of Strive, he's not only entirely sure where he wants to go, but he feels better equipped and confident to start exploring. The moral of Bridget's story is to do what makes you happy, not what makes society happy. And contrary to what the IRL trans movement contains, they are equally complicit in applying societal pressure onto people like Bridget.
Hold on, motherfucker. How can you go,
It's forced by the trans left-winger Westerners
to, well, maybe she'll go trans, maybe not? This is just straight copium, my guy. Listen, I know you know you like your femboys. I too like femboys. But dude, this character is trans. Go back to watching Astolfo hentai and let him show off the Gorilla Grip bussy. Another person replied,
It's auto-translated, right? I assume last sentence was she because of no indication of gender other than name Bridget, but previous ones having he imply that something suggested to it it's a correct one to use. Maybe he was called Otokonoko, or at least Otoko in there.
This is the original text. I'll follow it up with it being spoken.
石渡ブリジットはまだ賞金稼ぎを続けています。しかし、石渡ブリジットはまだ賞金稼ぎを続けています。しかし、その目的は当初と違い、単純に生活費を稼ぐためとなっています。賞金稼ぎとしては名の知れた存在となり、親や生まれ育った村にも多大に貢献しました。今ブリジットは本当の自分を理解しようとしている時期です。
And like an African American father with a baby mama that had a kid in high school, he went out for milk and never came back. Another user states,
Nope, it's not canon. Bridget is still a guy, Japan says so. So listen to them.
So I found this out over the past 2 days of looking into this situation. I think you might need to read it.
I'm good I have this.
You are coping and seething. You just can't accept what you're seeing. Yes, you're coping and seething. The truth it is scalding, and now you are molding and coping so hard. Coping and seething.
Yeah, I think we are gonna move on to the other major criticisms of this supposed bad ending. Another point of interest is the argument that Bridget was essentially groomed into being trans. This debate once again stems from the lore of her character. Linked as a reply under a video covering Bridget, still think the Bridget being trans starts to be kinda groomer-ish when you remember the backstory given on the character, but no one really seems to be talking about that. Almost like there's a reason why.
Thread, this whole situation rubs me the wrong way. As a trans girl myself, there is not a trend I dislike more than erasing a character's previous identity for the sake of making them trans. I want trans representation to be trans representation, not an unnatural character shift for a pre-existing character. There seems to be this sentiment that anyone who doesn't like this change is just a bigoted nerd. But no, it is okay to be frustrated when a decision is made for a character that completely walks back all their previous lore. When people love something, having something they care about be changed for a reason that honestly makes no sense for the character is okay. I yearn for the day where the trans community appreciates actual trans representation and not just celebrating the characters that are changed to trans just because of their gender non-conforming aesthetic. I don't love how the game seemingly implies they were groomed into this identity since they were forced to dress like a girl most of their life, even though that wasn't the gender identity they identified with. As a trans girl, this whole situation is just icky to me. I hate how every trans rep we get has to be the erasure of a pre-established feminine man. I just want a character who genuinely represents the trans experience honestly. I know I'll get called a pick-me, etc., but this is what I believe, and if you can't expect these very valid issues I have with this character being portrayed as trans, then I don't know what to say.
This entire thing makes no sense in the context of the storyline. Whilst yes, Bridget was raised as a daughter, she was never forced into being trans. That choice came later by Bridget's hand and no one else's. The ending in and of itself is proof enough. The idea that Bridget was groomed into being trans because they'd literally die, then eventually become a woman after she was proud of her birth sex is not grooming. Especially since, grooming someone into being trans, that hasn't exactly worked out very well historically speaking. These are just some of the things you will see from the debate on Bridget. It's honestly kind of pathetic. Concerning the debate at the end of the day, the debate is kind of dumb. At the end of the day, it's the creators. We can talk about the many other conversations that can spawn from it, like the aforementioned translators warping the original story, but that couldn't be applied to this situation because it's actually built into the storyline by the creators themselves. You can't change that. At the end of the day, we are turning a non-issue into an issue. Just an average day on Twitter, really. Though, I thank all of the Twitter stans and weebs for getting me really invested in this topic. I also now main Bridget in Guilty Gear Strive, because of this fucking Russian roulette-inducing situation.
Yay.
So let's do a quick addendum real quick, because there has been new developments in the debate on Bridget. As of the date of September 14th, 2022, Daisuke Ishiwatari has come forth straight up confirming, not hinting this time, straight up confirming that Bridget is now trans. That it is straight up confirmed, there is no more debate on the subject matter. Basically proving to all those Otokonoko motherfuckers, those femboy likers, I'm sorry, the debate's over. Fucking got him! With that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you on the flip side.
If I keep on faking it like this, I know I'll regret it. So from now on, no matter what, no more lying to myself. Thank you, both of you.
Don't mention it. Happy trails, cowgirl, or, cowboy.
Cowgirl is fine, because I'm a girl.
Fucking, ladies and gentlemen, the bad ending. We achieved the bad ending, guys.
That was lame.
That
was really lame.
This is the bad ending, ladies and gentlemen, that everybody's been talking about.
This is like a fucking just like. This is just lame. This is just cringe and evil. It's so fucking stupid. It's so dumb. I hate it. I hate it so much.
The fucking ending.
Kill it with fire. Kill this drama with fire.